oh, you remember Ralph McGill? He used to be the liberal editor of the paper. Mm-hmm. He interviewed Max Risky, and she used to be a columnist.
You're saying about women in the union? That you spoke a lot because you were one of the...
Because I was in the union, yeah. I was called upon by the universities. I was used a lot. I don't know, one time I was introduced, there were 3 speakers, and the chairman was embarrassed when he said it afterwards. He realized what he said. He said, we have 3 speakers, a lady and a gentleman, and a woman organizer. I turned it into a joke. I had everybody laughing. See, and I was a guest speaker at ITU meeting. Firefighters. But in the universities I was, and I used to be called upon quite a bit. You remember? Here it was the IUT meeting.
Yeah, ITU in 51.
The Pressmen's Union.
Right. With your hat again.
Okay.
So they called you the hat lady?
Yeah. Here comes the hat. Here's Tony. You know, I was trying to think of his name, the Textile Workers Union.
Oh, Valenti.
Yeah, Tony Valenti. I couldn't think of his name. Oh, I wish I looked like some of the pictures I'm seeing today.
Tell me about women in the movement.
Huh?
Tell me about women among
leadership. In mine,
roles.
First of all, I think the needle trades were better than any other union recognizing women. But then their largest amount of members, their majority of members were women. Maybe that was the reason why. But I remember Dorothy Belanca in the Amalgamated, when I was in the Amalgamated Union in Rochester, New York in the mid-20s. She was already a vice president. And they had several of them on then. And so does the ILG. Now, whether they're getting any more recognition from other unions, I don't know. Whether the teachers union or any of them are getting the recognition.
How about in the South? Was it rare to find women leaders in the South?
Well, in the teachers union, they had a number of them. But that was because they were politically geared in Georgia. Ira Gerald, I guess she's dead now. But she used to be the head of the teachers union there, and she was sort of mealy mouth, but I'm very critical of this. So people that don't have a definite point of view, that they go with the wind. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They change so quickly, depending on you either have opinions. That doesn't mean that you can't sometimes change for the better. You know what I mean? Improve. But some people could change from one day to another, depending on who is speaking or who is leading or what is more favorable position to take. And I've never been that way. Maybe it's a mistake. I could have. Alex appreciated my work. In fact, he exploited me shamefully.
Alex
Rhodes. And he knew who to call when he needed somebody they wanted a job done. But he didn't appreciate talking back to him. I'm not going to do it. I don't want to do it. I don't think it's right. He told me once he wanted me to pull the men out in Longview, Texas, to a strike. Then we won't have to pay strike benefit to the others. I said, well, the hell I'll do that. I said, they're going to lose their job. There won't be any work. And I said, do you think we'll be able to hold them as members? We'll pull the men out, and it only costs us a little bit, but we may lose the entire tribe. I said, if you want to call them, you come here and call them yourself. I'm not going to call them. Well, when you do that 3 or 4 times, you know.
Yeah.
Once he wanted me to put black people in Dallas in the shop that never had a black worker in there. How could I put a picket line of black men where all white girls were were working. I'd lose those girls. I'd lose their membership. You say, well, which is better? You've got to educate them. You educate them after you have them, but not while you're trying to get them, right?
Right.
So again, I didn't do it. I don't know a number of times I didn't do it.
I heard a talk by Eula McGill. I don't know if you knew her.
Who?
Eula McGill. She was an organizer for the Amalgamated in the South. Anyway, she said that sometimes it was easier for her being a woman because people just didn't, they didn't respect her as much. They weren't aware of what she was doing. They just didn't think that she was seriously organizing. And that she could get away with things that men couldn't.
Well, I think you had more access to homes than men have. You could go on an early Saturday morning, you find a woman in a robe or disheveled in some form and get in, where they wouldn't let a man in. Not only that, but if a woman was alone, and the husband was away, they might have a jealous husband. They didn't want to let the man in. And then when I had John Coolish, and he was a darn good organizer, there were times he'd say, Carmen, I can't get into the home. And I knew it was because he couldn't, but I knew why. He couldn't get in because that particular woman, I said, she has a very jealous husband. I said, if you want to go, I'll go with you. So there were times when he couldn't get in. But actually, I think that they're accepted very readily. And yet you found some that, no, I never found the Southern women would accept a woman if they thought she was intelligent enough. They would accept her as readily as a man. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, that's part of what I'm trying to get at. Do you think that's different in other parts of the country that they wouldn't accept?
No, it depends on who is speaking. I mean, I never faced that. I didn't face it in San Francisco without, even when I had trouble with Harry Bridges. I didn't have that. There were plenty of men in the department store union, quite a number of them. Not as many as women, but then they were in other positions besides clerks, elevator operators and in the back of the stores and different things. I'm deviating now. Now, what do you want to know?
Well, I had one or two general questions I wanted to ask, like, okay.
There's a hat again.
Right, yes,
We had a hat day declared by the Mayor Hartsfield in Atlanta. I don't know whether you came across that, whether it's as a significance or now.
Okay, here's
He
something
became
else.
a Christian, when we had, he took a liking to Zaritsky after the contract was signed, when we had the dinner for Zaritsky, honoring him, he was invited and he came. And he enjoyed it so much. And especially when he heard Zaritsky say that we believe in exchanging ballots, using ballots instead of bullets, he thought that was a good
Like that.
expression,
Okay, when did you go to Europe then? When did you make this trip?
Oh, the Marshall Plan.
Marshall Plan.
15-1.
And how did that come about?
How did that come about?
Yeah.
The two people that used to that were in the labor movement, the opposite of Joe's union in the textile.
TWA.
Yeah, TWA. He's the Agnes Doty, Kenneth Doty, and Agnes Doty, husband and wife. They were both. She was a teacher, though, not in the school, but she was a very educated woman, had all kinds of degrees and things. And well, let me find this, or I'll never find it. Okay, then I'll come to it. I thought I had one of them. He left the movement.
Doty from the.
Doty's from the textile workers union, the CIO textile workers union. They went into government work, and both of them were highly educated and well trained, and various universities, had a couple of degrees and everything, very fine people. Well, they took a liking to me in Atlanta. We were very good friends. And when they went to work for the Marshall Plan in Paris, and they knew of this so-called, what they call a junket nowadays, you know. She says, well, my Carmen has worked long enough, and they liked me pretty well. She's earned this trip, you know. And if anybody do any good having her on the trip, she'd take it seriously. It wouldn't be just a junket. So they proposed it. Well, the AFL couldn't say much because I was vice president, you know. But they did choose uh, Bill Boulanger. He was from Boston in the Textile Workers Union, CIO Textile Workers Union, and Gibbons from the Teamsters Union from St. Louis. I don't know whether these names mean anything to you.
Yeah, Gibbons I know.
Gibbons you would probably,
Yeah,
don't you?
Boulanger I don't.
Boulanger.
French?
Yeah, he spoke a certain kind of French, yeah.
Quebecois, yeah.
Yeah.
The French Americans like French Canadians. I used to live up there.
So the three of us, the black man never materialized because he was taken ill the last. There were supposed to be four of us that went.
And this is a government-sponsored tour?
Government-sponsored tour. They turned in our names as being to study the effects of the Marshall Plan. There was, you know, the advance of communism in Paris at that particular, France at that particular time was pretty frightening. And so they decided that they'd send a group of labor people to see if they could influence the people in the labor movement, because they had so many unions, you know, that representing the workers. So we were sent in. I was accepted and we went. It was a period of about 6 or 8 weeks, I forgot, about 6 or 8 weeks. Oh, it was a wonderful trip. And, but one thing I didn't like is that, of course, the two men I was with, I didn't expect any differently, but nothing is too good for organized labor was their slogan, you know. So they had to have a chauffeur, they had to have a limousine to go to all these God-forsaken places in France that didn't even have money to spend on a machine, a mimeograph machine. You know, I used to be ashamed to arrive in such luxury. You know, it was scandalous. And I told Agnes and Ken, so we're going to do, you know them. They're used to high living in New York. And I said, yes, but we're trying to make an impression on, well, they couldn't control it. Because everybody who went on these junkets all demanded those things. So he says, why shouldn't organized labor have it? So we were to interview the workers. We were to interview the employers. We were to interview the various contingent, the periphery of the people, the municipal people, and so forth and so on. But we were sure to keep away from the communist unions. Well, first of all, they wouldn't have even given us the time of the day, as far as that was concerned. So we had to learn and it's where Ken and Agnes helped, because they had been there for a number of years already. They knew the entire situation. So we did, and we'd go into factories. We'd interview. We had an interpreter. We'd interview the workers, what they knew about the Marshall Plan. Some of them didn't even know there was such a thing as a Marshall Plan. If they happened to have business agents or shop chairmen who weren't sympathetic about the United States helping out, you know, on the Marshall Plan, wouldn't tell them anything. They'd sometimes take the stickers off the boxes so that you wouldn't know where it came from. So it was, to a certain degree, it was withheld, but to another degree, then there is always a resentment that America pays, you know, seems to be able to buy anything it wants. You know, money was the problem. That's why I felt that our arrival in that kind of an atmosphere, they made fun of us, you know. Our unions, our kind of unions. Plush offices. Some of them had been to Washington and seen the offices and different offices, you know. And what do you care about the workers and what have you? And when I heard it, I was from Atlanta, Georgia. When they heard I was from Atlanta, Georgia, and the Moroccan situation was rocking, at the time, boy, did they get after me. I said, just a minute now. I said, first of all, in America, nobody laments what's happening as far as the bigotry in groups like the Negroes and the Indians, or all the people who have been subjected to all kinds of exploitation and bigotry. But at least they can still open their mouth and say something without being put in jail or they're killed. At least there's hope that we can still, and there's been slight changes. And I told him, even in that left, in the short time I've been there, I've seen changes that I never thought would be possible. But it was interesting because what we couldn't, well, Gibbons couldn't forgive him. Gibbons was awful. He said they thought from their waist when they talked to their bosses. They did, subservience, Patrone, who'd sicken him into thinking. He kept saying that, and I don't blame him. As long as you people have that kind of attitude. Of course, we were talking to the wrong people. Because people that come to meetings, they really most of them already know the score, right?
Yeah.
It's the ones that don't come that it's very difficult to reach. Then the boys went down in the mines, which I couldn't go. They said the men were superstitious about women going down to the mines. Well, I got a copy of the report somewhere, and if you want to see it or use it, what we said, we were very displeased with what we found, that the money had not trickled down to where it should have trickled down. It only got so far, and then it suddenly stopped. And that the effect on the worker, which was the people we were concerned about, if we wanted to stop communism, then we're not doing the job, the real job. So we're not censoring the plan as a whole. We're just saying the implementation of the plan is not complete and is not correct. Well, when we got back to Washington, we got our report before we got there. They had called a meeting of the press. They canceled it. They didn't want it to go, but it got in because everywhere I went, I talked about the Marshall Plan, and I told the truth, See, like for instance, shift in ECA aid to workers urged, that sort of stuff.
ECA is the Marshall Plan, right?
Yeah. See, here's another one. Here's the one I like the heading on this one.
You make it up, and this one you're attractive lately. The others you just.
Oh, one calls me calmly. I don't know which one, but the one in Atlanta always used to say the word calmly. I said, you flatter me. Well, see, now we got them from all over, saying labor observers, RAP, ECA money use. Then there was a Rochester girl who was there with the ECA, and she got this in the Rochester papers for me, and all my Rochester friends were so pleased that I got, nice. French.
Why did they send you to Italy? Or did you? You must know Italian when you grew up.
Yeah, I could have at least. Well, I know my Italian is.
A long time.
Yeah, I was forgotten first. Gibbons. He's terrific. I don't know what's happened to him since Hoffa died. I haven't heard anything. He'd done a terrific job in St. Louis.
I know what's happened.
What's happened to him?
Gibbons was their left winger.
Huh?
Gibbons was their left winger. And the Teamsters. Gibbons was the one who came out against the war.
Oh, I knew he was a left winger, but not a commie. He was a socialist.
No, a socialist. And he was the one who spoke out against the war, against the Vietnam War.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, I heard him speak a couple of times. And they froze him out. Fitzsimmons froze him out. Just shut him up.
Oh, they voted him out? So
well,
what is,
pros and I don't know. I think he's still in. Maybe even still have an official position, but his power in the union is really very narrow because they can't. The Simmons
oh,
can't.
Fitzsimmons a crook anyway.
He can't take any challenges. You know?
No, because wouldn't do him any good. Look what happened to, and Jimmy himself was a crook, so I tangled with Jimmy in the Teamsters in Winchester. We had a fight,
Jimmy was a tough.
but we won out. Yeah, he was tough. What else do you want to know about the Marshall Plan?
Well, I think
See, democracy at stake. What paper is that? So,
Butcher Workman.
I don't know. What is it?
Butcher Workman.
Oh, the Butcher Workers, yeah. Well, I used to like Tom. What was his name? Pat?
Carmen.
Carmen. I used to like him. When I was in Chicago, I knew him.
Yeah, I heard a lot of nice things about him. People I knew him.
Yeah, he. So we were there, and we talked to workers through the. I remember one time, we after the meeting they took us in the back of the room, and they had just some cheap wine, because they were awfully poor, and they were so tickled to give it to us, and then I was so proud that I just barely put it to my lips because I don't know how to. I'd never learned how to drink, and so. I didn't know what to say to the woman. Didn't know from Merci or that's all I knew or something. And so I took hold of her hand and I said, what did I say? Not comrade, but this. I used a French term. I've forgotten it now. Something that means comrade. Maybe I used an Italian word. And she understood. And then. Oh, she beamed and smiled, and then she took everybody put their hands together around the table, and they began to sing some French songs, and it was such a lovely spirit. And I thought, they're trying so hard, because the rift there between the commie unions and them. In fact, we were refused a dinner in one place because the chef was a communist. He said, when he heard they were Americans, he said, I'm not going to serve them. I don't want to cook for them. And I remember Gibbon said it's a good thing he told us because I would have been afraid to eat it anyway. He was anti-communist, although he was very pro-socialist, very ardent socialist. But he had deviated a little bit from his course too, just a little bit. He wasn't the same guy that I used to know years ago when I was growing up. But then neither am I guess.
So that was. How old? This was 52 that you went?
We went in 50.
50,
right.
Yeah. And when you came back, it seems from the clippings that you didn't just go back to Atlanta, you wanted sort of a tour? Did you? You went around speaking?
No, I came back to Atlanta, but then as I went on along to different places that I was working in, whether it was in Alabama somewhere, I'd always be I was told by the government wherever I go to see if I could get something in it, but of course they didn't know I was going to say that much. But to get the story across, and it really was very interesting though.
And so the next couple of years until what, until 56?
Now, where do we go?
5 or 6 years of organizing in the South, I guess.
Yeah, 52. Where's Hannah? Where did... 46. Well, this is still Atlanta, isn't it? This is still Atlanta.
Los Angeles.
You because, I appeared, you remember this, the high cost of, before the Sparkman's Committee,
Right.
Labor vividly presents high cost of living,
Number's 47.
yes, in 47. Let's see what this is, maybe this is report of the Committee on Organization in Atlanta for the state. What is
Oh, 43rd Annual Convention, Georgia Federation of Labor. It doesn't have a date on it.
it doesn't? Okay, there's a magazine section here.
Listen, are you getting kind of tired of this? Because you've been doing it for over 3 hours now.
I'm not tired, are you?
You're tired?
You must be tired.
I know.
Well, how about another beer?
I sort of like a cigarette, so I'd like to do. I don't know. Would you mind if I smoked?
No, I tell you what, as
Open
long
the
as you
window.
open the window. Conditions. What were the people doing? What were they thinking? What was the attitude of organized labor? And I haven't done that yet. You know what I mean? As I go along, or even if you have to remind me of it, because I think it's important, because the atmosphere and the climate is so important what happens. And if there is a gradual change, it's so darn gradual you can hardly see it, but there has been changes. Even if it's minimum wages, the question of Medicare, things that have come up, and what the unions have embodied in their contract, I haven't done any of that stuff at all. I think I'm going into just personal things, what I have done personally. I don't think that's so important as if what that particular era made possible for our work. What were the conditions? I didn't mention the blacklist, the kind that we had when we were in Rochester, when the unions were young, every employer, the Chamber of Commerce of every town had people who, on their list, people who were members of the union, who were blacklisted and couldn't find a job, especially if they participated in a strike. The Yellow Dog contract has some sign that you had nothing to do with the union. Those, I think, are very important. The advent of the minimum wage. What I found in each city as I went to what was the minimum wage. Because, as a union, we could get very little. Our unions, needle freights, have always, in the beginning of building, have been very difficult. First of all, our trade itself is not a rich trade. If you ask too much, you push them out of business, because anybody could start a hat shop, or at least anybody used to start a hat shop. With a few $100s and you could start a hat shop, which meant that the shops in New York particularly were notoriously small, which made the work even more expensive and more difficult. Luckily, in the South, they were fairly large because the area made it possible. Now, what made people go into these areas? Cheap labor, expense-free, all kinds of overtures from the town itself, the chambers of commerce and the industries there, to bring unions, to be sure that there'd be no unions. That's the first thing. What I had in Winchester, Tennessee, and that's the South. That was a windy for if ever there was one. Long time, and the odds were put out against us. And Joe got beaten up in Winchester, Tennessee. And so did one of our other organizers, Cora Valentine. By the way, one of the interesting things in the South that I didn't find was any criticism of my name, or the fact that I was born in Italy. I made no bones about it, I thought I might just as well tell them at the outset. When I said to them when Tilmy was going south, I said, that's nothing new to me. I said, after all, I was born in the South. and stopped a little of it. So that immediately dispelled any feeling of wanting to I guess, criticizing me that I was foreign born. They were the work is interesting, but I don't know about now.
Yeah.
I tried it 2-3 years ago in New York. I wouldn't want to do it in New York. First of all, you don't know who's going in and what building, where they work. You don't have access to them like you do in other centers. Not only that, but there's so many aliens that you couldn't even get their name. Even if they understood it, you'd need an interpreter. And they wouldn't give you the time of the day for it. But I don't know. Maybe I found it difficult because I couldn't. If I can't talk to them myself, I feel as though I'm not making the contact. It's what I had. The experience I had when I went to Florida. They sent me to Florida. I had the Cuban people to deal with, and my Italian helped me somewhat. But some words are similar but mean a different thing entirely, so I have to be very careful that I was using the right word. But I did have an interpreter. But there, comunista. That was the moment I say I'm from the Union. I was a communist, you see, and they had that reaction because of their man in Cuba. And but still, we got 2 locals there by miracle, but nothing to do with me. I got the members to like me, but they wouldn't have voted for it. We got them through New York, they were the runaway shops and the contacts were made in New York. So it's no credit to me that we got them. We got them through the Union Label Drive, which was one of the things that we really used, in spite of the fact that years and years ago it cost us a pretty penny for what they call the second boycott and restraint of trade, the Danbury case.
Yeah.
But we had perfected the use of the Union label to be able to use it against the employers without breaking the law. In other words, we were picketing the stores, not the stores itself, but the product that which was permissible at the time. And I don't think that even the Amalgamated or the IFG has been able to perfect it to the extent that we did. You see, they tried it at a number of places and they didn't succeed, but that's how we finally got Texas Miller, the Adams hat.
The
label did it, yes. We kept the thing alive for about, I kept going there year in and year out. I spent some miserable months there because it's a one-horse town, no place to go and nobody to talk to, and far away from Dallas, about 60 miles. I mean, not a place you could go drop in on any time. But the people kept up their faithfulness all that time. We had 3 elections. We'd win the election, we couldn't get a contract, and then they'd challenge us again, hoping that in 3 years or 2 years we may have lost our majority, so we had to reorganize again.
One of the things that people say about organizing in the South is that because it's so much more rural, a lot of industry is in rural places outside of the cities, unlike the rest of the country.
You have to go 40 miles, 60 miles. I don't know how they can commute every day. When we were in Garland, Texas, we used to go within the radius of 60 miles to get members that we thought were important. And they were scattered all over these one little horse towns. Terribly hard.
Also, there were a lot, because it was a rural area, most of the population would be farmers and sharecroppers, tenants, that there are a lot more scabs, a lot more strike breakers around, much more than you would have somewhere else in the country.
Sure. Well, even in Virginia, Richmond, Virginia, when we had the black people striking, I was naive enough to believe that the black people would go through a picket line. I really thought that. Oh, I thought there might be a few scoundrels, but I didn't imagine that would be an invitation for every Negro who was unemployed to go through that line. Oh, in 3 days. That strike lasted 7 or 8 months. In 3 or 4 days, that place was full of scabs, and they were vicious. They were reaching down at the bottom of the barrel to get them. Prostitutes and people who had never worked and all kinds, only to break the spirit of the strike. The scabs would come with broken bottles in their hands. If they saw someone approaching them, they just soon. And I didn't hear. I had the NAACP and helping out and getting out leaflets appealing to them, and called all the clergymen and spoke in their churches, and nothing helped. But it was interesting. After the strike was over, the company thought they'll never get these to vote for the union. But I knew they would. You know why? Because they had promised them the moon in order to get them into work. They didn't keep their promise. So they were fighting mad that the company broke their word. So when we went to visit them, they received us okay. The company wanted an election. We said, we surprised them. We'll take it, and we won. But we didn't get a contract until about 3 years later, and it was a lousy contract.
One thing you seem to be saying is that very often when you were organizing, and you were organizing very often places that hadn't been organized before, that didn't have any history of it, that you had to be careful with the strike breakers, careful with the scabs, because they were potential members. You're not dealing with professionals at all. You're dealing with people who could have been workers themselves very often. Did you deal with them? Did they bring in? Did you ever face professional strike breakers, thugs?
But these were not professional in most of these cases.
Yeah. I understand that. I'm saying, did you deal with them? Did you ever that?
The professional ones, it's different.
Yeah. Have you had that experience?
They've had experience. But these that, once they go through the line and they go after 3 or 4 days, then there's a solidarity inside that they have to break. I noticed that it's very hard, even though they're sympathetic. They'd like to make the break. Then they're afraid that they're neither here nor there. The strikers will hold it against us that we scab for 4 or 5 days, and the others will hate us. And especially if in a small town where they have to live together, there's all kinds of fears. But the fear of being fired, the worst part I saw was in Greenville, Alabama. That was the worst fear I've ever seen, because the man who owned the factory, or ran the factory for the Hat Corporation of America, the whole town was owned by him. He was his banker, head of the bank. Head of the department store was his. All his people, the judge in the courthouse was his cousin or something. They were all related. So they held the town in the palm of their hand. And I remember that one of our organizers who was beaten, Clara Valentine was beaten up. The governor was Big Jim Folsom. Jim Folsom. His daughter now is married to Wallace. But he was the governor. He was somebody that you could really talk to, because when she was beaten up, Joe got in touch with him, and he really told him all. And I was in the hospital at the time, and I had just had an operation. And told the nurse, don't give Miss Lucia any newspapers, because she'll get out of bed. I know her, she'll get out of bed. They kept papers from me, and they didn't tell me until about a week afterwards. The reason why we didn't tell you, we were afraid you'd put your head in the coat and go out. But Joe was beaten up. He was eating in the restaurant with another business, one of the business agents from Atlanta. And when he came out, the men were waiting for him outside, and they beat him up. Hurt his nose and broke his glasses. Not too savagely, because there was too many. It was the main street of the town. And Cara was Cara. she's a Christian Scientist. I said, didn't you hit the back? She said, oh no, we're not supposed to. Boy, I said, I'd have punched and kicked and hollered. Oh, they'd have heard me downtown.
One thing that a lot of people that I've heard who spent time in the South, especially in the 50s, said was that the race thing really got worse after the Civil Rights Supreme Court decision, that the whites got much more sensitive on it. You know, that they were much more hostile, and that was
They were.
the testing point of everything all of a sudden.
It was. It was hard even to hold on to their. I had a girlfriend in Atlanta while I was there at the time. My Ada Mae, her maid, it's a personal possession. My Ada Mae, there's nobody like Ada Mae. One day Ada Mae didn't show up, and somebody said they saw her in town, and she wasn't sick at all. Told my friend. And when she asked Ada Mae where she went, she said, well, I had a meeting. She said, what kind of a meeting? NAACP meeting. It was the end of her tenure, her job. After years of service, but that's the feeling was that they couldn't stand it. There was a very, very violent reaction in the beginning, but tapered off. I understand that you ought to know that you've been there. Or can't you tell much? How long have you been there now?
I've only been there about 5 years.
Huh?
5 years.
Well, 5 years, you see some changes.
Yeah. Well, Jackson was elected black mayor, and
Maybe it changes the other way now. I get letters from the same people. I got one from Rabbi Joe. She says, Carmen, you wouldn't love Atlanta anymore. Because I always did love Atlanta. It was good to me. She says, we're afraid to open our doors. We don't dare look out. Nights we're afraid. Well, I thought to myself, we got the same thing here. And
it's become very much like any other big city, except it's
haven't you
greener.
find that the feeling is changing toward the Negroes? It's very hard to keep defending them. I defended I didn't defend the Negro. I defended what's happened to them because of the background, their suffering and everything. That doesn't go anymore now. It used to be accepted more readily, and particularly by Jewish people, who used to be just the opposite, And they say, well, look what's happened to us. We're still the beating we've taken, but we don't go killing anyone. I said, but you could disappear if you wanted to. You could disappear, but these people can never change their complexion. They never can. And that's what they hate us for, is because they got a permanent coloring that they don't like anymore. But I'm finding it myself difficult to be as prone to protect them as I used to. I myself am changing. See, was that necessary? Why? It's all right now. They had their revenge, but these people brought up so much hate. I tell you, when I went to Atlanta, I was shocked. I had never had any dealings with black people. They were a mystery to me. Actually, they didn't even exist. It's trouble that we didn't take pains to find out what was happening to them. And first thing I was warned, so I was warned so often that I couldn't tell when I first went whether they were black or white by their accent, And every time I'd hear a southern accent, must be black, I'd be scared stiff. They got me so terrified that I couldn't hardly walk without being afraid. Then what happened when I began to read, and actually there was some intelligent articles about the colored people in the Atlanta Constitution with McGill there. I began to change. It's what do you expect of people who for 200 years have been treated like slaves? I began to change and try to understand, began to work with them, and found that they were all right. They weren't that bad. They were just fighting for their rights. But one night I was going to the Poncianas. Does it still exist on it was a black nightclub.
I think so.
On what's Albany Street?
Auburn.
Auburn
Auburn.
Street, on Auburn Street. So I said, I'm going to a meeting. I was organizing the Scripto workers. There's a Scripto pencil company there. And I was calling. I said, you can't go there alone. I said, why? Because it's a Negro section and it's at night. I said, well, all right, I can't get anybody to go with me, so I got to go alone. I got on the bus, and the conductor said, where are you going? The very fact I got on that bus. I said, I'm going to the Ponciana. The Ponciana? He said, that's a black place. What are you doing? A white woman. I said, try to be smart, you know. I said, well, how do you know I'm not black? And he looked at me, well, you're not pretty dark. And it looked funny. He wasn't quite sure after that. They keep giving me dagger looks. He'd say, she must be white. She must be black. She must be white. She must be black. I said, will you call it off when I have to get off at such and such a street? So he did. He said, you'll be lucky if you get back. Well, by the time I got inside, I was terrified. I really was terrified. I thought, well, that's stupid of me to come. How do I know? I'm going into a black place. They're having a dance. They might have liquor. Oh, he told me, he says, you know, when they get mad, oh no, that's the policeman. So I got upstairs and the policeman met me. No, the white woman around. I said, I'm not white. He said, no, I'm not white. He said, you're not one of those smart ones that keep saying they're not white just to get in. I said, well, I wouldn't say that if I wasn't. I'm not white. I wasn't. I'm dark. Yeah, I can laugh now, but I wasn't laughing after I got through with it. He began to tell me what they do to white women when they get drunk, you know, and how they stick out their razors and cut their inside out and their entrails.
Oh, God.
Well, I tell you, my hair curled that night. I didn't need a permanent the next day, and I was so frightened. But when the intermission, I said I'm supposed to speak to them during intermission. The intermission came around, the colored man who recognized me, the main person there. He said, Miss Lucia, you can come in now. So I went in, and they were don't get too close, give her time to breathe, you know, and they were very protective. But I got out of there, and I couldn't find a cab. I wanted a cab the worst way. I couldn't wait till I got out of there. I was terrified, just terrified. And I have a feeling that maybe they're doing the same thing to us here, you know. Even in these apartments, we're getting, especially they're mugging older people. They follow them, and then they get in the stairwell. And when they hear the elevator, the door open, they come out of the stairwell. And we've had a lot of cases here. So, what do? You can't stop trying to protect, because there's always a vicious crowd.
Right.
In every movement, even as far as the labor movement is concerned, irons were clean sometimes either, you know. So.
I had a friend who was in a black apartment complex.
Can I give you another beer?
No, I don't want to go soon. There's one or two other things I want to do on my street. I'll tell you, I had a friend who was